Today we are diving straight into what you need to be made aware of when buying a used Range Rover Evoque. But more specifically, we will be looking at the famous model variant 2-litre TD4 Ingenium engine. Now, it's no secret that Land Rover has had a lot of bad press over the last few years, with not only cars being stolen, but also the reliability on some of their cars. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a big Land Rover fan. I've owned many of them over the years with minimal issues, but buying this Evoque has been my biggest risk with the brand, as these Ingenium engines are heavily documented online with major problems. And as some of you may already know, in the first week of giving this car to my mum, the dreaded timing chain rattle began, which meant that I ended up paying for a repair, which was over £2,000 just to get this car back on the road safely. So now I thought it would be a good time to find out a little bit more about the potential issues with these Range Rovers. So let's go for a drive and get into exactly what are those big common issues, what are the signs to look out for, and how much money do you need in the bank for those repairs. So let's go for a drive. So let's kick things off straight away and get into some of those common problems, and we'll start it off with the DPF. Now, what is a DPF? Some of you may not know. It is a diesel particulate filter. The purpose of a DPF is to reduce emissions and create cleaner air coming out of your exhaust. As well as this, all that black soot and black smoke you probably saw coming out of old cars back in the day, because of a DPF, it helps reduce that or eliminate that completely. So that is the main purpose of a DPF. However, it is one of the common issues noted with these Ingenium engines. DPFs do go on plenty of other cars as well. It's not just to this specific car, but in this case, for me, it's going to be one of the common issues. Now, some of the symptoms of your DPF starting to fail or just completely have gone, you may start to see a bit of black smoke coming out of your exhaust when driving, more so under heavy load. So when you're really accelerating, the rear of the car may be a lot more dirty because where there is a lot of black smoke coming out, it'll stick to the car, especially more so when it's raining in the winter seasons. Something else which you may expect is reduced performance and potentially even the car going into limp mode. But most likely the first point of call you'll see on the car to let you know your DPF is on its way out is the DPF light. You'll get a fault come up on the screen, which will probably tell you the DPF is nearly full. I know with the Range Rover Evoque, like the bigger one, it would say to me, DPF nearly full, please drive over 40 miles an hour for 15 minutes. That way, the car would give itself a force regen, which will help clear out the DPF so it doesn't get clogged up, because once the DPF does get clogged up, you may not be able to start the car, so you don't want it to get to that point at all. Now, how can you give your DPF the best possible chance to not fail? Well, one of the most simplest things you can do is make sure you're using this car on long trips. By doing that, you're going to prevent, the DPF from clogging up, because one thing DPFs don't like is short journeys, start-stop traffic. So that is the biggest thing you can do to help your DPF to have the longest life as possible. If you do run into problems with the DPF, you can get them cleaned. I think you can get this done for around £300. The prices I'm going to talk about today are a give and take, so just use it as a guide. It's not an exact price. Another thing which you can get done is a force regen, but done via the computer plugged into the car. Now, I've had this done in the past where a mechanic sat in the car, plugged his diagnostic tool in, and we went for a drive, high revs, he'd done the regen, and when we got out of the car, you could literally smell like how bad, like it was really, really hot underneath the car. So that is something which you can do as a bit of maintenance just to make sure your DPF isn't clogged. But if you ignore all of those things and you've left it to the very last minute and your DPF is now full and needs to be replaced, you're going to be looking at a repair bill in the region of about £1,500 to get something like that replaced on this car. So you'd rather take measures to not let that happen, but if it does, that's the sort of money you're going to be looking for. So definitely you want to be keeping an eye on your DPF. Now, the next common issue with this car are the EGR valves. Now, what is an EGR valve? Well, in short, what it's designed to do is it recirculates your bad exhaust gases back into the car through the intake system, and what this does is help reduce emissions and improve your fuel economy on your car. And the symptoms of this failing are actually quite similar to what the DPF was, so it's always worth, when you do have issues, is getting a diagnostic tool plugged into a car. But the symptoms for the EGR failing would be black smoke again. The performance may potentially be a bit reduced if it's not running correctly, but the black smoke is definitely the most obvious thing with an EGR valve. As well as that, an engine management light may turn on, and if it does, the good thing is you'll get a fault code, so when you do plug in the diagnostic tool, you'll know if it is an EGR valve or if it's something else. So that is the symptoms of the EGR valve failing, but what exactly causes it to fail? Well, once again, lots of short journeys, not doing enough motorway trips, because what happens is you'll get a large buildup of carbon deposits, and the valves inside the EGR, they get sticky, they don't function correctly, so the gases won't start to circulate. And once that happens and you've got that buildup of carbon, when you give your car a good kick down or you just rev it, a bit of black smoke will come out of the exhaust. So again, symptoms are very, very similar to the DPF. And one thing you're going to notice, a lot of the theme of today and the common faults are related with things like the emissions. So just something for you to think about. Now, if your EGR valve does get very, very bad, of course you can do the same thing, take it to a carbon clean specialist, get it done. It's not a lot of money, a few £100s to do so. But for the majority of you, you're probably going to look at getting the EGR valve replaced if it needs be. You're going to be looking at around £700 to do so. So it is quite expensive for such a small thing, but important to take the car on long runs, get it up to speed, get it up to temperature, and give it a hard run every now and then. Now, the next common fault with this car, which I'm aware of, and some of you will be aware of if you've watched my videos on this car, and that is the dreaded timing chain failure. What an expensive job that was on this car to get fixed. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put in the link in the description below so you can check it out after. But basically, I bought this car and within a week, obviously I had to get the timing chain replaced. So I showed the ins and outs of it, the costs involved, and yeah, expensive job to get done, but we'll get into everything of why these things happen. So timing chain, what does it do? Well, it keeps the crankshaft and the camshaft in line with each other to make sure the engine is operating correctly, because if the timing's out, your car's not going to run properly and you're going to run into catastrophic issues. Now, the symptoms of your timing chain beginning to fail, there are a couple of things you need to look out for, and I'll be honest with you, if you do see these symptoms, just address it straight away and get it fixed, because if you don't, the catastrophic issues could be that your engine goes completely and you'll need a full rebuild. So get it sorted straight away. I know it's expensive, but if you don't and cause further damage and your bottom end goes, it's going to be double if not triple, and you're going to need a new engine. So get it sorted. Now, the symptoms you need to look out for, the first most obvious one is your engine will sound more rattly than normal. So the most obvious and most simple thing you should be able to pick up on, even if you're sat at a set of traffic lights or parked outside your house. If you feel that your car sounds louder than normal, get it inspected, get it checked out, because it's far too risky to take that chance. Something else which may happen, if the timing chain is stretched, your car may stall sometimes, because obviously where the chain's stretched, just not being able to run as it should. But also, if your chain is stretched that badly, your engine management light should come on as well, and when you do plug it in, your diagnostic will give you a fault code related to the timing. So those are your symptoms that you need to look out for. There isn't a cheap fix around this. Obviously, I paid in the region of just over £2,000 to get it rectified, and unfortunately it is a well-known documented issue with specifically these Ingenium engines on Land Rovers. The reason for failure is it's a bit of a weak point on the car. The chain guides are made from poor material, meaning they sometimes break off, and that is something which can cause damage as well. But the timing chain is the issue itself. Now, something which you can do to prevent your chain from stretching are regular oil changes. Now, on this car, it suggests you get them serviced every sort of 2 years or around 20,000 miles, give or take. I'm not sure exactly, but it's 2 years. So I think that's a very, very long time. In all honesty, you want to get a car serviced yearly. And now that I've had this chain replaced, even if it's updated and it's stronger, I'm not going to take any chances, and I'm going to service this car every 5,000 miles. When I say service, I'm just talking the basics. So engine oil and engine filter. So it's not going to cost an arm and a leg. Every 5,000 miles, it will just give this car a better chance of lasting longer. It'll be more healthy, but more importantly, I just don't want to take any risks with that chain. So that is something you need to think about when you're looking at one of these cars as well, the potential cost implications of getting a timing chain replaced. Now, the fourth common issue with this car is that the turbocharger can fail. Now, what I will say is turbochargers can fail on other cars as well, not just this model. Parts of it can be to do with how the car's maintained over the years, but in this case with this car, it is a common fault, so we're going to address the issue and talk about why that is. So let me just quickly explain what a turbocharger does to an engine. Well, it forces more air into the engine. In short, more air, more fuel is going to mean more power. And being a diesel car, they're very common now that they all pretty much have turbos. Back in the day, you would find diesel cars without turbos, and they were very, very gutless. So that is one of the reasons why we have turbos on these cars. Now, let's talk about the symptoms of a turbo failing on your Range Rover Evoque. There are a couple of things that you will look out for. The first thing is you may hear some sort of whooshing, whining noises coming from your engine bay. That could potentially be your turbo, but you have to be careful because whining also can be other things as well, such as an alternator. But if you do hear any noises out of the ordinary, like a whine or like a whoosh, get it checked out. Now, something else which complements a turbo failing is you may start to see blue smoke from your exhaust. This will be because your turbo is leaking oil and that is coming down through onto the exhaust. So the blue smoke is oil burning through your exhaust. Now, the biggest cause for turbo failure is lack of oil in the engine, because everything has to circulate around. If the turbo is not getting enough oil, it's not going to be lubricated correctly, meaning you will suffer with turbo failure. Now, this kind of links back to the point of getting a car serviced more regularly. I feel that where these cars have such a big interval between services, it can be a potential culprit for the turbos failing, because if the oil is getting old or people are doing more mileage and thinking, you know, it's fine, we've done more mileage but we're still within the 2-year period, that's not a good thing, because your oil is degrading. So even though your car oil level may be okay, the quality of oil will be bad, and if that is the case, it won't be lubricating your engine properly, your turbo properly, and things like that are going to cause failure. So that is one of the biggest points of why your turbo may begin to fail. Making sure the oil level is okay and changing the oil regularly is going to give you the best possible chance of keeping your turbo's life good. Another point as well, just for people who may not know, is you don't want to be putting your foot down when your car is cold, because your oil isn't up to temperature, it's not circling around correctly just yet, and if you do so, you're going to be starving your engine, starving your turbo of oil, which again is going to lead to a lack of lubrication and things failing. So those are the 2 reasons why failure can happen to a turbocharger and how you can prevent it from going bad. But in the case of your turbo does go, it isn't a cheap job. You could be looking around the £1,500 mark to get a turbocharger replaced and fitted. Maybe cheaper, maybe a bit more, but on average, that is the sort of figure you're going to be looking for. Now, the last point I'm going to talk about on these cars is the AdBlue. Now, AdBlue is something which came on newer cars. It's all to do with emissions, and that's why I mentioned this earlier. A lot of the problems we have now is because we're trying to reduce emissions. We're fitting things to cars to reduce our carbon footprint, and manufacturers are kind of forced by this now, where they're having to bring down their CO2 levels on their cars. But let's talk about the AdBlue then. So the AdBlue and the NOx sensor can be a bit of an issue on this car as well. Now, looking at the symptoms, if your NOx sensor begins to fail, there are 2 things you may start to see. The first thing is your AdBlue could be getting used a lot quicker than normal, but also if you do have problems with your AdBlue, and in the case of it does run out because your NOx sensor is giving wrong readings, you may not be able to start and drive your car at all. So it's really important that your AdBlue levels are always okay. Some other ways you may know that your NOx sensor is failing: engine management light again, plug your computer in, find out what the code is. You could also have reduced performance, and also the fuel economy may be reduced as well, and if your NOx sensor needs replacing. And if it does, unfortunately, it is not cheap. It is going to cost you a lot of money. It's not a cheap job, but unfortunately it can be a bit of a common issue on this Evoque failure. So guys, hopefully that gives you a quick and good overview of some of those common issues and things you need to look out for when you're buying a Range Rover Evoque 2-litre diesel Ingenium engine car. There are other issues as well, don't get me wrong, but I just wanted to go over the 5 which I felt are the main issues. But definitely have a read up on some of those faults, and then you get a better understanding of things you need to look out for when you are buying, because if you buy a bad car, things could get costly. So it's important you check for good maintenance, good service history, look at things that have been repaired, such as these common issues, and if they have, how much do they cost, when were they done. And if you do all those things, hopefully you can have a good experience buying a Range Rover Evoque. But in this case, it's early days for my mum with this car. I'm going to keep documenting if we do have any more issues with it. As it stands, we've just had the timing chain issue done. I say just, but I'm glad it's been replaced, and fingers crossed now we don't run into any major issues. But of course, I'm going to document everything on this car. Plenty of other Land Rover content on the channel, big Range Rovers, Range Rover Sports. So if you are enjoying all this content, hit that subscribe button for me now. If you've enjoyed this video, smash up that like button. But on that note, guys, I'm going to end this one here. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'm going to see you next Sunday at 6 p.m. Take care, guys.